There's something uniquely powerful about consistency. The brain doesn't respond well to grand, sweeping efforts followed by collapse. It responds to repetition. Small habits, when performed consistently, create lasting changes in the neural circuits that govern our behavior, our thoughts, and ultimately, our identity. The idea that you can transform your life in 21 days isn't marketing hype, it's deeply rooted in what we understand about neuroplasticity. When you repeat a behavior daily, particularly one that leverages the brain's natural rhythms, you begin to shift the way you perceive, feel, and act in the world. It's not about motivation, it's about structure. The first habit is sunlight exposure within 30 to 60 minutes of waking. Light is not just illumination, it's a signal. When photons hit the retina in the morning, they activate specific neurons that cue a cascade of biological responses. Cortisol levels rise, not in the way we associate with stress, but in a way that enhances focus and alertness. This sets your circadian rhythm, improves dopamine release later in the day, and helps you sleep better at night. The change is subtle at first. Maybe you start waking with more clarity, or you feel more alert without coffee. But over days, and certainly by day 21, your entire sleep-wake cycle begins to realign. And when that happens, everything improves: energy, focus, mood, and emotional regulation. The second habit is deliberate cold exposure. This doesn't require full ice baths or extreme discomfort, just 30 seconds to 3 minutes of cold water on the body, whether it's a shower or brief immersion, can activate the release of norepinephrine and dopamine. These are not just feel-good chemicals. They're neurochemicals that improve alertness, increase motivation, and reduce inflammation. The discomfort triggers a hormetic response, meaning the body adapts positively to the stress. Over time, you build not just physical resilience but mental resilience. You learn that you can sit with discomfort, breathe through it, and come out stronger on the other side. That lesson translates into everything else: difficult conversations, workouts, work challenges. Your tolerance for life improves because your nervous system adapts to adversity instead of avoiding it. The third habit is focused breathing. Specifically, daily engagement in a protocol that downregulates the autonomic nervous system. One of the most effective is a physiological sigh, 2 inhales through the nose, followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth. Doing this for just 1 to 3 minutes a day reduces stress in real time. But the cumulative effect is what matters. Over 3 weeks, the brain begins to expect control where it used to expect chaos. Neural circuits between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala become stronger. The regions of the brain associated with conscious control and emotional reactivity start to communicate more fluidly. So instead of getting overwhelmed, you pause. Instead of panicking, you breathe. This shift isn't magic, it's biology. The fourth habit is writing down your goals in the morning and again before bed. But it's not just about listing dreams, it's about engaging your brain in the direction of intention. When you write something down, you activate the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. You're signaling importance. And when you repeat that process every day, you begin to build something called value-based saliency. The brain starts to filter the world in alignment with what you've told it matters. Opportunities stand out more clearly. Distractions become easier to ignore. You're not forcing motivation. You're programming clarity. The morning entry sets direction, the evening entry locks in reflection. You become someone who lives with intent instead of reacting to the world on autopilot. The fifth habit is movement. This doesn't require intense training, though that can be valuable. What matters is consistency. Even 20 minutes of walking each day, especially outdoors, initiates a neurochemical cocktail that includes dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins. But movement also triggers BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is like fertilizer for the brain. It helps neurons grow stronger and more connected. This enhances learning, memory, and emotional regulation. Over 3 weeks, the impact becomes deeply visible in how you think and feel. Ideas come easier, emotions feel more regulated, and perhaps most importantly, you start to associate your body with capability. Movement stops being a chore and starts becoming identity. The sixth habit is reducing stimulation at night, particularly artificial light and digital input. The brain is not designed for constant input, and yet late, night scrolling floods the visual system with photons that suppress melatonin and confuse your circadian rhythm. But more than that, it keeps the brain in a state of vigilance. The habit to build is simple: 60 to 90 minutes before sleep. Dim the lights, eliminate screens, and engage in analog tasks: reading a physical book, journaling, slow breathing, light stretching. This signals to your brain that it's time to power down. And over 3 weeks, you'll find that your sleep becomes deeper, your dreams more vivid, and your waking energy more stable. Sleep isn't just rest, it's neurological restoration, and when you structure your nights properly, your entire next day changes. Each of these habits on their own is powerful, but when layered together over 21 days, they don't just change how you feel. They change how you function. You become more resilient because your nervous system is more balanced. You become more focused because your dopamine pathways are stabilized. You become calmer because your parasympathetic system is trained. The change isn't theoretical. It's measurable in how you show up, how you speak, how you respond, and how you recover. What's critical to understand is that small doesn't mean insignificant. The brain doesn't respond to drama. It responds to repetition. Consistency trumps intensity. Doing something small every day creates structural changes in the brain. Synaptic pruning removes what's no longer needed, and myelination strengthens what is. You are literally reshaping your neural identity one repetition at a time. There's also a psychological shift that occurs when you commit to 21 days of practice. You start to see yourself differently, not as someone who wishes they could change, but as someone who's already doing it. And that identity shift is what sustains the habit long after the 21 days are done. You're not just someone who tries, you're someone who trains. You don't hope to be focused, you become focused through action. And when those around you ask what changed, you won't need to explain. They'll see it. In how you hold your posture, in how you manage your time, in how you listen, in how you choose your words carefully, and how you act with intention. The habits become who you are. Let me know if you'd like this turned into a YouTube script with visuals, a short form summary, or if you want versions for Instagram or Shorts. Certainly. Here is the continuation of the speech in the style of Dr. Andrew Huberman, without directly mentioning him, continuing from the previous section and expanding it toward a full 4,000 words in total. The idea of habit formation has long been misunderstood. People often believe that motivation precedes action. But neuroscience tells us that's not true. Action precedes motivation. When you move your body, when you breathe with intention, when you set your environment up to support change, your brain begins to respond by shifting internal states to match the behavior. This is called embodied cognition. Your body teaches your brain what's important, not the other way around. That's why these 6 habits are so effective. They give your brain signals through behavior, through repetition, through rhythm. And over time, that builds new neural circuitry, new pathways that reinforce the behavior even when the original motivation fades. One of the most misunderstood elements of habit change is friction. We tend to assume that making things easier will make us more likely to do them. But the truth is, a small amount of strategic friction can actually increase the strength of a habit. For instance, waking up and stepping outside for sunlight exposure, even when it's cold or cloudy, creates a level of commitment. It requires you to override comfort. That override is powerful. Every time you act in favor of your long-term goal, despite a short-term inconvenience, you strengthen the brain's capacity for executive control. That's not just discipline, that's architecture. You're rewiring your brain to prioritize what matters over what's easy. These small decisions compound. When you choose cold exposure over comfort, you're not just stimulating your nervous system, you're rehearsing resilience. You're telling your brain that stress is not to be feared but to be leveraged, and that lesson becomes implicit. You stop overreacting to little things. You stop needing everything to feel perfect in order to take action. You become a little more dangerous in the best way, not volatile, but stable, composed, focused, and that's a presence people notice. The same is true for breathing. You might think, how can something as small as a 2-minute breathing protocol change my life? But that's missing the deeper principle. Breathing is the only autonomic process that we can control both voluntarily and involuntarily. That means it's the bridge between the conscious and subconscious brain. When you intentionally slow your breath, you signal to your entire nervous system that you're safe. That shift reduces cortisol, balances the autonomic system, and creates space between stimulus and response. And in that space lies power, the power to choose your response, the power to shift your state, the power to lead with clarity instead of reaction. Breathing isn't just calming, it's neurological leverage. Journaling and goal writing taps into a similar leverage point. Your brain has a reticular activating system, essentially a filter that determines what you notice and what you ignore. Writing down your goals daily trains that filter. You begin to see opportunities where you once saw noise. You begin to act in alignment with your stated intentions, even subconsciously. This is how you start to experience synchronicity, not as coincidence, but as the brain doing its job effectively. When you see something repeatedly, your brain assumes it's important. So when you write your goals every day, you're not just reminding yourself, you're encoding them into your perceptual system, and that leads to action. When you combine that with movement, the effects multiply. Movement isn't just about burning calories or improving cardiovascular health. It's about chemical optimization. When you move, your brain releases endorphins, increases dopamine, and activates areas related to memory and learning. Walking, in particular, integrates the left and right hemispheres of the brain, leading to greater cognitive flexibility. That's why some of your best ideas come when you're moving. It's not random, it's neural stimulation. And when you make movement a daily practice, your mind begins to expect clarity, creativity, and calm during and after. You train yourself not only to think better, but to feel better. Nighttime habits are equally important. Sleep is not just rest, it's recovery. It's when the brain flushes out toxins, consolidates memory, and strengthens synaptic connections. And yet, we sabotage it constantly, through light, through stimulation, through noise. But when you create a consistent wind-down routine, you cue the brain for transition. Just like a dimming stage light signals the end of a performance, reducing blue light signals your brain that it's time to sleep. And the brain responds, melatonin begins to rise, core body temperature begins to fall, brain wave patterns begin to shift towards slow wave sleep, and when that happens consistently, the quality of your sleep improves. You wake up not just rested, but recalibrated. This is the essence of habit stacking. Each of these behaviors supports the others. Morning sunlight improves sleep. Cold exposure improves focus. Breathing improves emotional regulation. Goal writing improves motivation. Movement improves cognition. Nighttime routines improve recovery. The system builds itself layer by layer. You don't need to change everything overnight. You just need to build the base. Once the base is set, momentum carries the rest, and there's something else: identity change. When you start to see yourself as someone who trains the nervous system, who engineers their own state, who lives deliberately instead of reactively, you stop identifying with your past limitations. You stop saying, "I'm not a morning person," or "I have no discipline," or "I always give up." You realize those were stories, not traits, and stories can be rewritten. That realization changes everything. You go from being a passive participant in your life to the architect of your mind. This identity shift is critical. When we engage in behaviors that align with the person we want to become, we generate what's called prediction error minimization. In simple terms, the brain updates its self-image based on repeated behavior. If you act like someone disciplined, the brain assumes you are disciplined. If you act like someone focused, the brain builds pathways to support focus. This is how you reprogram your operating system, not with willpower, but with evidence. And every day that you practice these habits, you build that evidence. You might not notice it on day 1. You might not even notice it on day 5. But by day 14, your sleep improves. By day 18, your energy stabilizes. By day 21, your sense of control, confidence, and calm becomes something others begin to reflect back to you. You're no longer reacting, you're responding. You're no longer hoping, you're creating. That's transformation. Not because you tried to be someone else, but because you returned to the clearest version of who you already are underneath all the noise. This 21 Day shift doesn't end with a finish line. It opens a door to what's possible when you respect the rules of your biology, when you align your behavior with your neurochemistry, when you honor the rhythms of your brain, your body, and your nervous system. The tools are simple, but they're not trivial. Each one holds within it a principle of structure, of rhythm, of resilience. When you master these small, daily actions, you're not just changing habits. You're upgrading your system, one repetition, one breath, one step at a time. Would you like this formatted as a YouTube script with screen cues or visual direction for a narrator, or broken down into short-form scripts for reels or shorts? Certainly. Here is a conclusion to your speech on 6 small habits that will change your life in 21 days, written in the thoughtful Neuroscience. Informed style inspired by Dr. Andrew Huberman. Change doesn't happen by accident. It happens when small, repeatable actions are aligned with how the brain actually works. In just 21 days, 6 simple habits, when done consistently, can shift your biology, rewire your nervous system, and reshape your identity. These habits are not glamorous. They don't rely on motivation. They rely on design. Morning sunlight, deliberate cold exposure, focused breathing, intentional movement, consistent journaling, and structured evening wind-down routines. Each of these taps into fundamental principles of neuroplasticity, autonomic regulation, and cognitive optimization. Together, they form a system that moves you toward clarity, discipline, and lasting self-direction. If you apply these tools daily, your brain will not only adapt, it will elevate. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be consistent, because the brain rewards repetition far more than intensity. And in that repetition, you will begin to embody a version of yourself that feels deliberate, calm, and in control. Not once in a while, but every day.